Welcome to Life and Liberty Radio with David Householder. I'm Josh Jose, and together, you and I are taking another step toward freedom, both spiritual and political. So get comfortable, breathe in, and ignite your imagination. Envision a society that is spiritually deep and truly free. It's easy if you try.
This week, the California legislature will be considering Senate Bill SB 323, which would remove tax-exempt status from any volunteer organization that does not conform to the government's definition of sexuality. Now, at first glance, this seems like a good thing. It would protect LGBT kids from discrimination, from bullying, and we all know how difficult it is to grow up as a sexual minority in this country. And we, in no way, shape, or form, want to make life more difficult for people who struggle with their sexuality. What we're dealing with here, however, is something which has a cost, and everything in life is a trade-off. And I've learned that as I get older, that there are no clean decisions, and often progress in one area leads to going backwards in others. And where we've been going backwards as a society has been in our sense of freedom and liberty of thought. We've moved towards a more and more unified way of thinking, and we have become less and less tolerant of other ways of thinking. And one of the problems that this has exacerbated this is that the public sector or the government has gotten way too big. It's, depending on how you measure it, 40% of our GDP. And the public sector should be at the most 10% because it just has gotten huge, so that really the public sector and public taxes and public marriage licenses and public tax exemptions become everything. And so you have this crowd of people all sort of jockeying for favor from the king. The throne has become too big, and the gay marriage issue has really become a mother may I issue with the throne, and so has this issue with nonprofit organizations. And the idea that you would take away tax-exempt status from the Little League, the Boy Scouts, the Future Farmers of America, and 19 other groups is really difficult. Well, they should pay taxes like everyone else. Well, those groups don't have any money. If you've ever been a treasurer for a community volunteer group, they deal in 2 and 3 figures, and maybe sometimes 4, but it's right on the line all the time. Virtually no staff, virtually all volunteers, and our society depends on volunteerism. And of course, if we were to get rid of that by making them pay taxes like Exxon, then the government would have to supply all those things, and the government would get even bigger. So we're all jockeying for favor from the throne, and the throne has become too big. So the government's view on sexuality determines economics and licensing and everything else. Well, we were founded as a society that could hold different views on things. This is written into the First Amendment, freedom of religion and exercising one's religion. So let's say you're a Muslim and you don't believe in progressive sexual roles or definition of gender. According to the Constitution, you should be able to exercise that faith in a free society, and you should be able to associate freely with others who believe that way. And a free society is an uncomfortable society. It really is. If you want a comfortable society, have uniformity where everyone is trained to think the same thing so that there's no conflict. A society where we have free thought, there's going to be conflict. And you're going to have freedom of thought, freedom of speech, freedom of the press. But our founders believed that that was preferable. Once again, it's a trade-off, and the trade-off is uncomfortableness. And people just don't want to be uncomfortable. If someone's uncomfortable, we have to change everything around that person's uncomfortableness. So basically what California is saying is that we have to adopt the government view on sexuality. Otherwise, we'll be penalized by Sacramento, and Sacramento's become gigantic. Well, let's look at a couple of real examples here. What about girls and women's schools? What if girls and women want to have schools for themselves or groups for themselves to deal with women's issues? I was trying to sign up for an exercise class on flexibility recently, and there was a special teacher coming to town, and I read the description, and I thought, is this just for women? So I wrote to her and I said, hey, listen, it looks like this special class you're teaching on flexibility is for women. Is that true? She said, yeah, it is. I suppose you could come, but it would make some women uncomfortable because they were dealing with female issues and flexibility of the pelvic area, and we're talking about incontinence, we're talking about pregnancy, those kinds of things. And I'd really rather you wouldn't come. I said, fine. I was just looking for hamstring flexibility, so it's obviously the wrong class. And I think women ought to have a right to say, no, we don't want any men here in this group. Well, what if I'd said, well, I feel like a woman today, and that's sort of the new progressive feeling of sense of gender now that is being promulgated by certain authorities and certainly by the government. And what if I'd said, hey, I feel like a woman, so I should be able to go, and you have to call me Sally? Well, that's inappropriate. The right of free association for these women to gather as women and talk about women's issues should be okay, and I had to respect that, and I'm glad to respect that. Or what about the Roman Catholic Church? The Roman Catholic Church has tens of millions of adherents in the United States. I'm not Roman Catholic, but I have deep respect for the Roman Catholic Church. Don't agree with them on everything, but deep respect for their conviction on certain things. And they have a certain view of gender roles and who gets to lead a church. And for them, they have men leading churches as priests. And so maybe they'll change that someday. Maybe they'll let priests get married. Maybe they'll let, who knows what. But that's their decision on what to do about that. And according to this, if you take this to its logical extreme, we ought to remove tax-exempt status from them too, because they don't allow women to be priests. Well, where does this end? It really destroys the right of an alternative viewpoint and free association. And so I think that that's really, really troublesome. Well, I've included a video here from Ricardo Lara, who's a legislator in Sacramento, and he means well. But listen to some of the phrases that get repeated over and over in the video. We don't tolerate, we don't tolerate, we don't tolerate. This was spoken over and over. Does anyone else find this phrase troublesome? Shouldn't we have a tolerant society, tolerant of people who have traditional sexual roles and traditional sexual beliefs? Our transformed values. Is one not free to hold other values? Our transformed values. We have transformed and we have new values and you must have them. Well, I thought this country was founded on the idea that you could disagree. We embrace diversity, is said over and over. Well, really? What about including those who disagree with you? And the other one, we fund these groups with public tax dollars. Really? Since when is nonprofit status funding? I've never seen $1 in the coffers of such a volunteer group. As Tom Cruise would say, show me the money. I don't see it. Just because they don't tax them, they've done them a favor. If you tax them, you destroy them. There's no way they could survive as volunteer groups and communities with skinflint budgets if you didn't leave them alone. It's for the good of society that you let them do what they do. And they should be able to do what they do with their own worldview. And it shouldn't have to conform to one worldview. And this whole idea that we can't ever have discrimination. Well, the truth is, try applying for a job. And just go ahead and do that. Apply for a job and say, well, the job description says that it has to be a college graduate, but I don't have a college degree, so you have to hire me. Or this is a front desk deal, and it's basically would help to be a native English speaker, and I have a thick accent. What if you don't hire me? You have to hire me. What about dating? Can you discriminate in dating? Can you put preferences on an internet dating site that you like certain kinds of people? Or do you have to just say, I like people? And if you send me a woman, if you send me a man, if you send me a communist, if you send me a John Bircher, whatever, you have to, I can't discriminate. Well, the truth is we always discriminate. And there's times when discrimination is good. We make choices to associate with certain people and not with others. And we make choices to hire certain people and not others. We make choices to rent our buildings out to families that seem responsible and look like they're going to pay their mortgages. Should we say, well, hey, you have to give a mortgage to everyone, whether or not they have money? You're discriminating against the poor if you don't give $1 million mortgage to someone who has no income. We always discriminate. Now, there's cases where discrimination, of course, is ridiculous. Discriminating based on the skin color of a person, and I don't believe in race anyways. I think we're all blended and mixed, and we all have a whole mixture of traits. But discriminating against certain physical traits doesn't seem to be helpful. On the other hand, what about physical traits for strength? What if you have a job to replace lights in a stadium up on top of poles, and you have a handicapped person says, I've got to be able to get up there with my wheelchair? And you say, well, that's that's just not going to work here. You need to be able to climb this huge ladder. Or firefighters or Navy SEALs or those kinds of things. They discriminate based on certain physical traits. Well, we just do. We discriminate. And sometimes, of course, it's completely inappropriate. And the question is, where do you draw the line? And the line is not never discriminate. You've got to be able to discriminate. And what we're doing here is we're doing selective discrimination. We're discriminating against people with traditional Judeo-Christian Islamic views of gender, family, and sexuality. They no longer have equal standing in our society. If you hold those views, you can't exercise them in public. You have to keep them to yourself. It's also a demographic issue. It really is. I think there's good reasons for promoting traditional gender roles and traditional family roles. Now, that's going to make everybody mad, especially feminists and Greens, because Greens say, hey, we shouldn't have families because families lead to kids and kids are bad for the planet. And I just disagree with that. I think people are an incredible asset to the planet. And feminists are free to hold those views. I just don't hold them. I think family formation is really important for society. And I think that men and women are very valuable as family formers. And I encourage young people to get married and have children. Just got news yesterday from a friend of mine who is just got married and they're going to have children and they're young. And I was thrilled to hear that. I think family formation is the cornerstone of our society. And what if you think that? What if you believe that? Are you now marginalized? You can't think that anymore? Well, that's the traditional family gender role. It's not just some ancient thing from some book. I really do think procreation is good. And I think that we've got a birth rate which is highly problematic right now because it's so low. Ask Europe. And Europe is going over a demographic cliff, as is China, as is Japan. And it's not a good thing. In the past, for generations, people have encouraged people to get married young and have families and to stay married and raise them in a safe environment. And we've supported people who've done that. But now we say, hey, if you hold that view, you need to take second-class status to those people with more progressive views on gender. I think it's debatable. And I think America ought to have that debate. Well, that's all for today on Life and Liberty Radio. Thanks so much for sharing this part of your spiritual journey with me. Now, the views on this program are not necessarily those of my advertisers, sponsors, places I work, or do business with. They're purely my own, but I'm sharing them with you, so share your ideas with me. Write me on Twitter at Liberty House, LIBERTYHOUS, no E. Until next time, let's continue dreaming and working for a free and spiritually grounded society.